Malvanius growled at the man. If anyone else were present, they would think he looked like a child against the witch hunter's huge frame and terrible size.
"There are no secrets from a witch hunter."
The man politely bowed his head in understanding, obviously taking no discomfort in the witch hunter's presence. Malvanius was not used to this. Normally he might be suspicious, but this time he simply wasn't getting that bad feeling in his gut that he would normally get about someone when questioning them. He quietly liked this man. His confidence and professionalism, his inner strength under the pressure of his company made him stand out. Perhaps this was a man who could end up working on his team once fully qualified, thought Malvanius. Suddenly he heard himself and took a step back internally, unsure of what had just happened to him then. Every time he tried to connect the possibility of the murders outside to this man, it just seemed to make less and less sense, as if he encountered a mental block that forced his normally sharp mind to find it hard to concentrate.
"One of my men will remain here, if that is okay. We will wait for the good doctor to return. Meanwhile, I want you to get some rest at the very least, and join us outside just after dawn. Don't try and run. We have this house monitored completely."
"Of course," was the man's reply. The man then saw Malvanius to the door. The witch hunter's sharp, eagle-like eyes came upon the coat and hat stand. None of the garments upon it were wet. The man's shoes were not wet either. He checked the floor. The door had no mat with which to wipe one's feet upon, but the carpet was not previously wet or dirty, except for his own recognizably large footprints upon it.
"That will be all for now. I shall expect you later today."
With that, he was gone. Once the door was closed, the witch hunter who had previously disappeared around the back reappeared and shook his head at his leader. Malvanius wondered why he was really inviting the man to the scene of the crime later on. Perhaps to test him to see if he would make a good student material, perhaps to attempt to trick him once the others were present to throw him off. He still wanted to speak to the man's master, the doctor of the house. That remained a concern. The doctor did not return to his house that night, and still no sign had been seen of him by morning. This had already been reported back to Malvanius, and he was just glad to see Dieter appear. At least part of the proceedings of investigation could continue for now. He didn't feel hopeful about getting much from the other three he had gathered here. Dieter asked, "May I?" and Malvanius nodded affirmatively. The man then proceeded to investigate the bodies. Dieter began to deliver an assessment. "These men were bound to the spot, but not by force. There is no bruising anywhere. Perhaps they were afraid of something. Lack of defensive wounds suggests their minds were clouded beyond the possibility of defense. The killer was 6 to 7 foot in height, and this could not have been done by somebody working alone. The slashes to the torso and neck here and here indicate the attackers were full of rage." As the man's words echoed through Maestro's head, a strange vision began to take over his thoughts. As the student doctor recreated the scene, the wizard too was able to see it vividly. There were the two men frozen to the spot, afraid of a looming darkness casting across them. The doctor continued, "Death was probably instant, by knife wound to their necks. As you can see, the heads were left in place upon the bodies, but one was almost severed. Here. You can't do that sort of damage in any right state of mind." Again, Maestro was beginning to witness these things in his head. A blade lashed out and slit the jugular of one terrified man. His death gurgles did nothing to shift the second man from his fearful, cowering position. Unknown to him, the wizard had now stepped out of the interrogation line Malvanius had set in place for them. He was wandering about, as if in a dream. His eyes stared off into nothingness. His heart rate had increased considerably. The doctor continued, "The angle of the attacks indicate a right-handed person. From this right to left, swiping damage." The man aided the group's understanding of this further by gesturing with his own left hand, making a right-to-left slash of the air. The man's voice became a blur of sound and was gone as far as Maestro was aware. At that moment he was seeing everything as it had happened through the killer's eyes. He could see the men being ripped apart and their organs and insides being positioned across the wall in a purposeful, intricate manner, as if by some symbolic relevance being gained from its gory attention to detail. Somehow the body parts were sticking to the brickwork. He did not know how. Maestro was frightened and panicked, but still he could not break free from the vision. He saw the killer's gloved hands drawing a symbol on the wall high above the alleyway. Somehow, through the killer's eyes, he could tell he was elevated high off the ground. The symbol, it was familiar yet strange to him. What was it, he thought? Then realization dawned on him. It was the mark of chaos drawn in black chalk, the 8-pointed star that had been seen on many a chaos warrior's heraldry, but not often seen in the capital city of the empire itself, surely. Maestro wondered, as the rest of the symbol began to make sense. The mark of Slanesh was carved into it aggressively over the top, in red gore-encrusted blood. Rysandria called out, "Maestro!" as the wizard collapsed to his knees and coughed, spittle and bile making its way to the ground from his trembling lips. Meanwhile, in his vision he saw the picture go black and saw those two men receiving weapons from a secretive meeting of men dressed in black, hosted in what looked like a cellar that too was painted black. Suddenly Maestro's mind was his own again, and he shivered in trauma at the visions he had just witnessed. Malvanius asked,
"What is going on with you? Answer before I put you to the sword."
Malvanius meant his threat too. His sword was drawn and pointed at Maestro. He had seen the wizard's eyes change and wasn't taking any chances. Maestro weakly pointed upwards with one shaking finger up at the top of the alley wall, without even looking in person, his eyes averted downwards. Everyone else looked upwards, and there they saw the convoluted chaotic symbols drawn across each other. Malvanius's face took on a look of sudden supernatural zeal.
"It is a message from the pleasure god."
The last two words were uttered with a great disgust. Spittle had come out and remained on his lips as he furiously continued,
"Across the symbol of those men who are undecided. A power play by the servants of chaos."
Maestro pulled himself to his feet, a little worse for wear. Malvanius pointed the sword at the wizard's throat.
"Speak! How did you know that symbol was there?"
Tordrad reached down for his scimitar and was calmed by a look from Rysandria. Tordrad's hand still remained ready, but he did not draw the weapon. Maestro felt as if this ordeal had strained him, more than he could handle for this sort of interrogation, but he knew that his life would be on the line, so continued,
"I saw it through the killer's eyes."
"A confession at last! You are the killer!"
said Malvanius. Maestro quickly defended himself.
"Of course I'm not! The ebb and flow of powers that be."
He forced some more breaths in and out and continued,
"Born unto the witchling star granted me mage sight enough to see it happen."
Malvanius knew that this was a common occurrence in wizards, but normally those of higher power. For visions as precise and severe as these, he disliked wizards, but he knew that he had to understand them to understand the path to chaos. All magic was at its core chaotic after all. The witch hunters knew that. But the colleges of magic had their own police, the magistrates, who would often attend to rogue members of their order, so punishment of this one would be tricky politics. He decided he wasn't going to tell the wizard that, though. Malvanius sneered, a sneer so fierce that it made his facial scarring itch.
"You are a wizard studying to learn the law of heavens. I saw it on your license. You will have to improve, wizard, because looking into the future is what is called for in the celestial colleges, not into the past."
With that he seemed happy with his spiteful outburst. Still his sword remained at the wizard's throat.
"I don't like you," he added.
"I'm sorry,"
answered Maestro, genuinely.
"There's no need for that, witch hunter," chimed in Rysandria. "He has just been under a mental ordeal. I would rather you—"
Malvanius's sword at her throat cut her words off mid-speech.
"I don't like you either, girl. I don't like any of you."
Malvanius turned to Dieter, who was now standing watching the spectacle. He put a sword towards his throat too and continued,
"All right, this is how it's going to be. You say you're innocent. I have seen some suspicious things already. I will consider that a murderer might yet be amongst you. You want to prove you're innocent? You're a clever lot, all of you, eh?"
Malvanius was obviously taking Dieter into account too. as he stood back to address them all as a group now, and continued,
"So you will work together to find the culprit of this murder. You will do it before the sun sets again, or I swear I'll have the lot of you in my jail and find out things that your unborn grandchildren will be guilty of in years to come."